Hello, I'm Richard Ridge for BroadwayWorld. I'm in the Tony Awards pop-up shop in the Paramount Hotel, sitting with composer Stephen Schwartz, whose illustrious career spans over 4 decades, giving us such iconic musicals as Godspell, Pippin, and the phenomenon known as Wicked. Well, this year he's being given a special Tony Award, the 2015 Isabelle Stevenson Award. Please welcome Stephen Schwartz. Thank you so much for sitting here in the pop-up shop with me.
I know, this funny shop.
Isn't this pretty cool?
It's hilarious. It's
All
cute.
Tony memorabilia, very cute.
Oh, right. I just love that there's this store and then, like, in 3 weeks it's gone.
And then it comes back every year.
Of course it does. That's very New York.
You know, you're getting ready to receive the Isabelle Stevenson Award.
Right.
Tell me what that means to you, this honor.
Well, you know, it's an award for things that you do not thinking that you're going to get an award for them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Or even particularly that it's something that you'll be recognized for. You know, this award is basically for a bunch of things that I've done over the years. The ASCAP Foundation Musical Theater workshops that I've been doing for about 20 years. President of the Dramatists Guild, and then some of the benefits that I've helped to organize for the It Gets Better project and marriage equality and various other causes. And none of those are things that you are doing particularly to even have your name on. You know, it's a little strange to get an award for it, but I have to say that once this was announced, I got messages from people I haven't heard from for years and colleagues in the Broadway community. So that's been really nice, I have to say.
I know this is coming, like you said, you foster artists and new talent through the workshop. Tell me what the workshop and the Dramatists Guild means to you. These are very important organizations to you. Very
important. I mean, they're two very different things. The Dramatists Guild is the organization that represents playwrights and composers and lyricists all around America and stands up for their rights, helps them not to get too taken advantage of in their contracts, and fights against censorship and piracy. And for the past 6 years, I was the president of that organization, which you know, gave me a forum to talk about and work for things that I care about. And then ASCAP, which is the one of the two organizations, ASCAP and BMI, that help songwriters actually get paid when their songs get played. But ASCAP has this foundation, this educational component, and the ASCAP Foundation sponsors musical theater workshop every year. And I've been the artistic director for that for about 20 some odd years. Done it in New York and in Los Angeles. And we've also done it in various places, kind of pop up like this store around the country and even overseas in such disparate places as Latvia and Kenya and Australia. So, yeah, Tasmania, Australia. So, and basically it's a workshop for aspiring composers and lyricists who are looking to write for musical theater. And they present work and get it critiqued and get a chance to work on it a little bit. And you know, a lot of people, now we've been doing it for a while, so a lot of the names here on Broadway have come through that now.
Sure.
Which is very gratifying, obviously.
I want to go back to the beginning. You were brought up on Long Island in Roslyn?
Roslyn Heights,
okay.
Which isn't quite as classy as Roslyn. It sounds more classy, but it's actually not.
Because I was brought up in Glen Cove.
Oh, okay.
So
well, then you know.
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes away,
I went to
right?
Mineola High School.
Okay, I went to Glen Cove High School.
There you go.
So where did your love for music begin at an early age, and what were those early creative outlets for you?
I've been told by my parents, neither of whom is musical or in show business in any way, that you know, I was always a musical child and always liked listening to records, etc. Because it was Long Island and we were approximate to New York City, and they were theater goers and concert goers, so they started taking me to things when I was quite young. And basically the first time I saw a Broadway musical, I thought that, you know, that's where I want to live. So I knew very early that that was the world I wanted to be in if I could.
Yeah. Do you remember what your first Broadway musical was?
I do, because it was written by a friend of my parents, a composer named George Kleinsinger, who had several successful, what we would call concept albums in the day. And one of those albums was called Archie and the Hittabelle. And it was turned into what ultimately became a short-lived, unfortunately, Broadway show called Shinbone Alley. And so when I was about 9 years old, my parents took me to see that. And it was actually George who spotted the fact that I had some musical ability and suggested to my parents that maybe they should invest in a piano.
Wow,
Yeah.
that was Eartha Kitt, right?
Eartha Kitt and
Yeah.
Eddie Bracken, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was much criticized because it was about this cockroach played by by Eddie Bracken, who was in love with an alley cat,
Yeah.
played by Eartha Kitt. And it was much criticized because there was a big chorus of singing and dancing cats. And the critics said, why would anybody pay to see singing and dancing cats, which demonstrates the importance of timing.
I was like, timing is everything,
Everything,
right?
obviously, yeah.
Oh, I love that. You know, you have this incredible career on both stage and screen. So I'd like to mention a few of your highlights and just tell me what comes to mind, a story or a memory.
Uh-oh.
It's all good.
Okay.
This is your life, Stephen Schwartz. Here we go.
Scary.
Godspell, memories of the original production and the brilliant recent revival.
Yeah, you know, that sort of came out of the blue. I had auditioned the score for Pippin, which is what I came to New York with, for these producers, Edgar Lansbury and Joseph Peru, who were not interested in Pippin, but about 6 months later, after the audition, kind of out of the blue, I got a call from them and they said, there's this show at the Cafe La Mama that we think has potential as a commercial off-Broadway show, but we think it needs a score. Would you go and see it? Of course, they've denied it ever since, but I assume they called every other composer in New York that anyone had ever heard of, and they all said no, and finally, in desperation, they said, what about that kid with that Charlemagne musical? Yeah. So anyway, I went to see it, and it turned out that there were all these people from Carnegie Mellon University in it, which is where I went to school. It had started there after I had left school, but I knew some of the people involved, so it was a little bit like Old Home Week, and you know, we did the show quick. You know, the whole thing the whole score got written in about 5 weeks, and you know, we didn't really think beyond just putting it up opening night. And then when it opened and was this, you know, phenomenon, we were all a bit taken by surprise by it. But it was a really joyous experience.
You wrote it that fast.
Yeah, I was too stupid when I was 23 to know that you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So that's how much time we had, so that's how it got written. I mean, the show existed, in fairness.
Yeah.
And also, a lot of the lyrics are derived from the Episcopal hymnal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as if I had to write so many lyrics. And
Yeah.
tunes can write pretty fast, actually.
You know, I'm sure once you have to get something done, you just go down that road really quick.
I'm a big believer in and creator for myself of deadlines. Deadlines
Wonderful.
are your friend.
Okay. Because I remember looking at Theatre World Awards, there were like 9 productions besides the one in New York traveling around the country.
It became this.
Yeah.
It became a phenomenon. I think there were, in this country, there
Yeah.
were 10 productions running at the same time. They were like sit down
Yeah.
in various cities. So I spent about a year of my life traveling around the country working on productions of Godspell.
And there were so many great names when I looked in the Theatre World Awards of all these, would-be stars that were doing this.
That's the amazing thing about Godspell,
Yeah.
because it tends to be everybody's first job.
Yeah.
But they are really talented people. So, for instance, the Toronto company was pretty much the entire cast of SCTV and a little bit of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
It was, Victor Garber and Gilda Radner and Andrea Martin and Martin Short and Gene Levy, and that was just Toronto.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Donna Summer was in Godspell. I think Madonna was in a production of Godspell. You know, a lot of people that was their first
Their
theater
start.
job. Yeah.
Or getting their equity card.
Yeah.
And the revival. What a beautiful job that revival was.
I thought so. I thought it was so creative, and again, amazing performers in it, some of whom have already gone on.
Yeah.
You know, Uzo Aduba, who's now the star on Orange is the New Black, and of course Lindsay Mendez, but the whole company was just great. And again, it's always a lot of fun to work on that show because it's improvisational, so you never exactly know what it's going to be, and you know, it's really funny to see what they come up with. Another show that got revived recently in a revival I just loved,
yeah.
and by the brilliant Diane Paulus, and that was a great experience. I loved working with her, and the original production was a bit of a difficult working experience. It was directed by Bob Fosse, who was notoriously, though I didn't know it then, difficult and tough for writers to work with. And you know, I was very young and didn't have a lot of experience dealing with the politics of Broadway and the politics of collaboration. Really, my only experience had been Godspell, which was a very easy and joyous experience. So sort of being thrown into that crucible was challenging for me, and I didn't always have the best time, but you know, in the end the show worked out, and I think that some of the friction that existed between myself and Bob Fosse may actually have led to a better show than if either of us had gotten our own way all the time.
Yeah. Did it change a lot? Because you wrote this at school, right? It's
Completely changed. Completely.
Yeah.
It began at Carnegie Mellon.
Okay.
It was for this organization called Scotch and Soda that did an original musical every year. And at school, it was kind of like a musical Lion in Winter, like a musical medieval melodrama with a lot of court intrigue and plots and backstabbing, and then it sort of transmogrified over the years to becoming this story about a young man in search of what to do with his life, using the Charlemagne backdrop as kind of a metaphor and a jumping off point, but really was a contemporary story and a contemporary show. And then I think, you know, when Diane did it, she made it even more so.
Morning glow by your light, we can make a new day bright, and the phantoms of the night will fade to the past. Morning glow is here.
You ain't seen nothing yet, folks.
The Baker's Wife.
Yeah, it was very, very difficult when we first did it. We never got it right. It went through this very tumultuous out-of-town tryout and ultimately closed without ever coming to New York. It still never actually played New York. But then we did this little cast album of it that became kind of a cult thing. And so people kept singing the songs from it. And then ultimately, the British director, Trevor Nunn, heard some of the songs from it. He did a revival in London and kind of helped us figure out how to solve the show, though we didn't entirely solve it for that revival. But then a few productions later, it was done out at Paper Mill Playhouse with Gordon Greenberg directing, and then the show really worked. You know, we had fixed it. Gordon did a great job. It got great reviews, and so now, you know, we could put a little red ribbon on it. My son Scott said to me, you've worked on Baker's Wife for 30 years. Ever since I've known you, you have been working on the Baker's Wife, and now it's finished. What are you going to do now? So I thought that was funny.
One of the most beautiful songs is Meadowlark.
Thank you.
Easy song to write, hard? At what point during the process?
Kind of easy. I have to tell you, like West End Avenue, it wrote very, very quickly. I was going through some kind of personal stuff in my life at the time, so I was kind of all roiled up. And I think I just was able to take the emotion of that and funnel it into that song, even though the story of the song doesn't really have anything to do with what was going on in my life. I think the emotion of it got placed into the song, and I think that may be why people respond to it as strongly as they do.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful
Thank you.
song. Did you know it was going to be a big hit?
The song? No, to the contrary. The producer of the Baker's Wife, David Merrick, absolutely hated the song. He felt it was too long and it just stopped the show cold. You know, I tried to do an abridged version of it, and that didn't really work. And there was a point where he actually went into the pit in, I believe, Washington, D.C., and took all the orchestral parts, metal art, out of the pit so that the orchestra couldn't perform the song and we have to skip it. But that, obviously that just lasted for one performance. But that's how strongly he felt about it. So now the fact that it's sort of become this famous song is ironic to me. But things like that happen to me all the time.
That's crazy. But it's a
crazy.
great story. I'm
It's
sure
a
it was
great story.
horrifying at the time. Like, where's
No,
the
it was actually
orchestrations?
kind of funny. Actually, when I heard
Like, where's
about
the
it.
song?
I wasn't there, and somebody called me. Bob Billig, the
Yeah.
musical director, called me and told me, and I was just stunned. And
Yeah.
after I got done laughing, of course, I called my agent and I said, "All right, obviously he has to put it back." But he's made his point.
Totally. Working.
Yeah, that's another show which did not succeed initially on Broadway, but then became this show that got done all over the country and all over the world. Another show where I was able to learn a lot from what didn't work on Broadway and make some changes in the show and work with some of the directors who were doing subsequent productions. And it's in fact, there's one problem with it having been so successful for so long. Because it's a documentary, it keeps getting dated, and so we keep having to write new things for it and find new interviews. And there was a recent off-Broadway production that won the Drama Desk Award. It was very successful, that again Gordon Greenberg did, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, the composer of In the Heights and Hamilton, contributed 2 amazing new songs for it. So that's something that constantly gets updated in order to try to stay a little bit current with how the circumstances in the current workplace.
I just love the concept of how you had all these different people write all these songs for that.
It was a lot of fun. Originally when I first encountered the book and decided I wanted to adapt it as a musical, I thought that I would write the score. But then as I began to work on it, I realized that there were so many different characters from so many different backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures, and I felt if I was going to be writing all the songs, I would be doing pastiche a lot of the time and kind of imitating other writers. And so it occurred to me, why don't I just, instead of trying to write a song like Mickey Grant, the wonderful African-American composer, why didn't I just call Mickey Grant? Or instead of trying to write a James Taylor style song, pick up the phone and call James Taylor. The worst they can do is say no. And many people said yes, so I was lucky about that.
Rags.
I just heard that title song on my way to the city today on Sirius FM. They were playing it on the Broadway channel, and it reminded me, that there's just Charles's music for that show is so wonderful. I just think it's, maybe Charles Strauss's best score. And I always said that was the experience on which I learned to write lyrics. I really learned, I believe, the craft of writing lyrics. Up until then, which sounds strange since I think it was my 6th show, but I'd sort of been going on instinct up until then, and then because I was working with another composer, and we were always working music first, and Charles is quite smart about lyrics anyway, I feel like I really got a crash course in the craft of writing lyrics. So, I always appreciated that. That's a show it's the one show of mine I feel is unsolved. But maybe someday, Stephen Daldry or somebody will come along and want to direct it and say, this is how we should do it. And we'll finally solve that one. That would be nice. But it sure has, I think, some great music in it.
Yeah. So you said you worked music first. When you work with someone else, does it work that way?
It does. I mean, these days I collaborate fairly frequently with Alan Menken, albeit on films rather than theater, though we just did Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yes, and we sort of do the same thing. We basically work music first. So maybe that's just because that's how I learned how to do it when I was working with Charles. When I worked with Leonard Bernstein on the Bernstein Mass, actually we worked, well, no, that's not true. I was going to say we worked the other way. Sometimes I would give him a lyric, but now I realize a lot of the times he had music done already that I set lyrics to. Yeah. It's hard to do that, but I think ultimately it makes for better songs, at least for the way I write.
Oh, I love that. So what got you from Broadway to Hollywood, to like the Disney years and starting to write for movies?
luck got me from, you know,
Yeah.
it happened at a time when my career was really dead in the water. Nothing was happening for me. I had actually gone back to school, and I was taking psychology classes, and I was thinking of becoming a therapist. And then Alan Menken and I were doing a benefit one evening, and he said to me, you know, I'm working on this new animated feature for Disney, and we need a lyricist, and would you consider just doing lyrics? You know, and I, of course, had seen Alan's work with Howard Ashman. The reason, of course, he was asking me was because Howard had passed away.
Yeah.
But having seen Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and been so impressed with them, you know, I was delighted to be asked to do that. And then I wound up having this really great time out in LA doing animation, and you know, and I've got another couple of movies I'm working on now. So it sort of opened this whole door to me for you know, working in Hollywood, that it never had occurred to me that I would ever be able to do that. You know, now I have a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame, so strange things happen.
I just saw Hunchback out at Paper Mill. Beautiful, beautiful
Thank you.
production.
Yeah, I feel it's one of the best
Yeah.
best shows that I've ever been involved with. I just was thrilled with it. We're about to, I think it's all right to say this, I don't think it's a secret anymore.
Okay.
We're about to do the cast album. Disney has gotten in touch with us about that, so it'd be great to have an album there. And I know there are a lot of you know, theaters around the world actually that are interested in doing productions, but I have to say I don't think we'll ever match that production. It's disappointing that that particular production was there for 3 weeks, but you know, that's the bad part of live theater.
Sure.
Is that it's there and then it's gone.
I want to talk about the phenomenon known as Wicked.
Okay?
I mean, did you ever think during the time period when you were writing it, it would have the longevity it had? I mean, I'm sure you want that when you write something.
Well, I don't
But
think
the
one
success?
never really thinks about
Yeah.
that. You never think, you know, is this going to run for 10 minutes or 10 days or 10 years? I mean, you don't. You just are trying to get the show right and trying to get as close to whatever the collective vision is. For, you know, me and my collaborators, we're trying to get as close to that on the stage. We did have early inklings that we were onto something special because of the way people responded just in readings of the show, even when it was way too long and a mess and the story wasn't being told very well. And even when we first opened in San Francisco, and the show was a mess, at this point we were still in previews, and we were coming down after 11 o'clock, so the producers were horrible, you know, just saying, you've got to cut this because it's costing us a fortune every night. And I think that we had done 3 previews, and we had a creative meeting, which was very tense. And there was a lot of sort of yelling back and forth. This sometimes can happen out of town, even when the team, as we for the most part did, was a good collaboration, you can get tense. So I came out of that meeting, you know, having yelled at the director, and the director yelled at Winnie, and she cried, and the producers were yelling, we have to cut the show. And I came out of the meeting, and I was walking to the theater to meet with Stephen Schwartz, the musical director, and I got to the theater, and there was a mob in front of the theater. And I remember thinking, oh my God, there's been a terrible accident. A car has driven into the lobby, or a brick has fallen off of the current theater and hit somebody, and all these people are gathered because of this horrible accident that's happened. And then when I got closer, I realized it was a line at the box office. And that happened in 3 days before the show had even opened.
Yeah.
So we began to have an inkling we were onto something, if we could just get it right. All of us have tried to understand
Yeah.
what it is about the show that's made it such a phenomenon, because, there are hit shows, and, I've had my share of hit shows as well as failures, but every now and then something happens where it goes beyond the show itself. And you just hit the culture, the zeitgeist, at exactly the right time. To an extent, I think Book of Mormon has done that.
Mhm.
Way back at the beginning of my career, that's what happened with Godspell.
Sure.
It just was the right show at the right time. And then it sort of explodes. And there's no way of planning for it or expecting it. You just, if you get on that ride, you just enjoy it.
Yeah. Is there anything you can tell us about the talked about film version?
Just that we are at work on it. Winnie is working on the screenplay. I've seen we have an outline. We have she has some early scenes done. It's so much fun because we get to go back into this world and these characters that we love and now know very well, and think about how can we tell the story using what you can do on film. So there are things that we couldn't do on stage that now we can do. There's some things we did on stage that we can't do, and we have to find other ways of doing them. So it's really exciting, and it's a lot of fun for us to reimagine it for the screen. So it'll be there someday.
Well, tell us about your new show.
Okay, it will premiere in Vienna, in German, in the fall of 2016. Obviously, I'm not writing it in German. It's called Emmanuel and Eleanor, and it's about these two very flamboyant theatrical personalities who were kind of the Brangelina of the German-speaking theater back in the 1790s. There's a trick to it, which I'm not going to tell, but there's a surprise ending, which is kind of what made me do the show. But I'm having just a great time writing in the world of that kind of music. It's very Mozart-y.
Sure.
And Trevor Nunn, again, who's one of my favorite directors, is directing it. And the artistic director of the theater where it's being produced, whose name is Christian Strubeck, who's a very clever writer and very successful in the German language musical theater. He's writing the book. I just came back from there a couple of days ago, where we were doing a reading of the what we have so far of the second act. We're going to continue to work in English this year, and we hope by the end of the year that we'll have a complete show. And the translator is going to be Michael Kunze, who translated both Wicked and Hunchback of Notre Dame for me in Germany, and is a very, very successful writer in his own right over there. He wrote Elizabeth, which is the biggest hit that's ever been, originally written for the German language musical theater. So it's an amazing team. It's nice to do a show that's funny, I have to say. It's a romantic comedy. I think some of the scenes are just hilarious, and I haven't done that before. I haven't done a flat out A, comedy, and B, love story before. So I'm having a good time.
My final question is, what is the best bit of advice that you've been given, either personally or professionally, that you live by?
I had an answer to this, and obviously it couldn't have been such good advice because I've now forgotten it. But, I think that the most important thing that I've learned over the years and that people have talked to me about is just persevere. That you just, every time you get knocked down, you don't bounce up right away, but you just have to get back up and persevere. And it can lead to, if I had quit the theater in 1992, when I was back at school, trying to become a therapist, which I would quite have enjoyed, by the way, and hadn't gotten called to do Disney, and therefore had all of that stuff happen again, I never would have had Wicked.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, sometimes you have to hang in there for a long time, but it can be worth it.
Well, I thank you for an incredible afternoon.
Absolutely.
And congratulations on your Isabelle
Thank you.
Stevenson Award.
Thank you.
Stephen, a real pleasure.
Thanks. Always great to see you. Always great to talk.